The Arabian Sea shimmered under the honeymoon moonlight, its waves brushing against the secluded shoreline like whispers meant only for lovers. From the balcony of the luxury suite at the Coral Dunes Resort in Goa, lanterns glowed softly, casting golden halos across ivory sands. The air carried jasmine from the gardens below, blending with the salt of the sea. Inside, rose petals trailed across the king-sized bed. Champagne chilled in a silver bucket, and the faint melody of Bollywood love songs drifted from hidden speakers. It was supposed to be the perfect beginning. The just-married couple, Aarav and Meera Sharma, had checked into the suite only hours earlier, their wedding bands still gleaming, their clothes still heavy with the scent of turmeric and sandalwood from the lavish Delhi ceremony. Friends had sent congratulatory messages all evening. The new bride had shared photos on social media captioned, "Forever begins now," and the hotel staff had discreetly whispered that they seemed like the happiest guests they'd ever welcomed. But by dawn, the fairy tale would collapse into tragedy. At 4:12 a.m., the serenity of the resort was broken by a frantic phone call to the reception desk. A male voice, urgent but oddly steady, reported that his wife had fainted in the suite's bathroom and wasn't breathing. Within minutes, hotel security rushed up the marble staircase, keycards ready. They found the groom, Aarav, standing near the bed, shirt wrinkled and eyes wide, gesturing toward the open bathroom door. Meera lay sprawled on the tiled floor, her bridal bangles scattered around her wrists, one sandal twisted beside her foot. Her skin was pale, lips tinged with blue, and strands of her hair clung damply to her face as if she had struggled. The scene looked wrong, too arranged, too clean. The security guard noted the overturned champagne glass beside her head, the faint bruise blooming across her throat, and the claw-like scratches down the groom's forearm. When paramedics arrived 12 minutes later, their first impression was not of a bride overcome by sudden illness, but of a young woman who had fought for her life. The suite told a story of romance transformed into chaos. The rose petals that had symbolized celebration were crushed into the carpet like drops of blood. One wine glass remained untouched, still bearing coral lipstick marks, while the other lay shattered near the balcony door. Pillows had been thrown to the floor, and a chair stood awkwardly tilted, as if knocked aside during a violent struggle. A hotel staff member whispered, almost in disbelief, "She was a bride. They just got married yesterday." By sunrise, the Coral Dunes Resort was no longer a paradise of love and leisure, but an active crime scene. Guests in linen robes stood outside their suites, watching as police taped off the honeymoon wing and forensic teams entered with cameras and evidence bags. The press would arrive within hours, their headlines already writing themselves. Just married Indian couple's honeymoon turns deadly over groom's hidden past. For Meera, her married life had lasted exactly 8 hours and 43 minutes. Her wedding lehenga, carefully packed in a red trunk, would never again be worn. The promises exchanged before priests and gods less than 24 hours earlier now lay shattered among broken glass and rose petals. The perfect love story had ended before it truly began. And the truth, that this was no accident but a violent reckoning with secrets the groom had carried into their marriage, would unravel piece by piece, shocking 2 families and an entire nation. Long before her name made national headlines, Meera Sharma was simply the eldest daughter of a modest family in Lucknow, India. Her life began not in luxury, but in a small 2-bedroom flat above a tailoring shop on Aminabad's crowded bazaar street. The hum of sewing machines was the soundtrack of her childhood, blending with the calls of street vendors and the blaring horns of cycle rickshaws below. Her father, Rakesh Sharma, had inherited the tailoring business from his own father. He stitched wedding sherwanis and school uniforms late into the night, his spectacles sliding down his nose as the whirring needle moved steadily under his calloused fingers. Her mother, Anita, worked as a part-time tutor for neighborhood children, stretching the family's meager income to cover rent, groceries, and school fees for their 3 children. From the beginning, Meera stood apart. She was studious, disciplined, and ambitious, qualities that her teachers quickly noticed. While her classmates scribbled homework at the last minute, Meera studied by the faint glow of a kerosene lamp during frequent power cuts. She often stayed awake until midnight, poring over borrowed textbooks, her dreams far larger than the cramped walls of her home. Despite her academic talent, the financial pressures were constant. At age 13, she began tutoring younger children to earn a few hundred rupees a month, money she secretly saved to buy extra notebooks and exam guides. When her mother caught her hoarding coins in a tin box instead of scolding her, Anita kissed her forehead. "One day, this determination will take you far, Beta," she whispered. What fueled Meera's fire was not just survival, but vision. She dreamed of becoming a chartered accountant, a rare ambition for girls in her neighborhood, where most were encouraged to marry young and settle quietly into domestic life. She saw education not only as her escape, but as a ladder for her entire family. "If I succeed, we all rise," she once told her younger brother, Kunal, during a walk along the Gomti River. Through sheer grit, she earned a scholarship to Lucknow University. Her mornings began before dawn, helping her mother with household chores before taking a crowded bus to campus. Her evenings ended in the tutoring centers of Hazratganj, where she taught mathematics to restless teenagers to afford her own tuition. Sleep became a luxury she learned to live without. But even in the midst of struggle, Meera radiated warmth. Friends remembered her as the one who remembered birthdays, who stayed after class to help weaker students, who never seemed bitter despite the weight she carried. Her smile, bright and unwavering, masked the exhaustion that would have broken others. By her mid-20s, Meera had graduated with honors and secured a stable job as a junior accountant in Delhi. For her family, it was a triumph. Her father proudly told customers that his daughter worked in the capital. Her younger siblings looked at her as proof that ambition could bloom even in the narrow alleys of Aminabad. Yet success came with new pressures. At 27, Meera faced increasing scrutiny from relatives and neighbors about her unmarried status. "She is too focused on career," one aunt would say at family functions. "If she waits longer, all the good matches will be gone." Her parents, though supportive of her dreams, began to worry as well. In Indian society, especially within traditional families, marriage was not merely a personal choice, but a milestone that defined a woman's worth. Meera tried to push aside the whispers, insisting she would marry when she found the right person. But deep down, she yearned for companionship, for someone who could see her not as a burden or bargaining chip, but as an equal partner. That chance seemed to arrive when she was introduced to Aarav Malhotra through a family acquaintance in early 2021. On paper, Aarav appeared perfect. 32 years old, employed in a multinational firm, well-spoken and hailing from a respectable family in Gurgaon. Their first meetings were pleasant, filled with laughter over chai and shared stories about work stress and family obligations. Aarav seemed attentive, supportive, even admiring of her accomplishments. For Meera, who had fended off suitors more interested in her dowry than her personality, Aarav felt different. He respected her career. He asked about her ambitions. He praised her independence. "Finally," she told a close friend, "I think I've met someone who values me for who I am." The courtship moved quickly. Their families approved, wedding dates were discussed, and Meera, though cautious, allowed herself to believe that love had finally found her. She bought bridal magazines, scribbled Mrs. Meera Malhotra in the margins of her notebooks, and began imagining a future filled with shared dreams instead of solitary struggles. But hidden beneath Aarav's polished exterior lay shadows Meera could not yet see, shadows that would soon eclipse the light of her carefully built future. Her wedding, celebrated with marigold garlands and dancing relatives, would be remembered not for its joy, but for the tragedy that followed. For Meera Sharma, the little girl who had once studied by kerosene light, marriage seemed like the reward for a lifetime of sacrifice. Instead, it became the cruel twist that ended her story before it had truly begun. To the Sharma family, Aarav Malhotra appeared to be the answer to every prayer whispered in temple halls. He was tall, well-dressed, carried himself with quiet confidence, and spoke of a stable job at a multinational firm in Gurgaon. His family presented him as dependable, financially secure, and ready to settle down. In the matrimonial marketplace of Indian society, Aarav looked like a prize. But appearances can be curated, and Aarav had perfected the art of presentation. Born in 1989, Aarav was the only son of Mahesh and Sunita Malhotra, a middle-class couple from Kanpur. His father had run a small trading business, but years of poor decisions and risky loans ended in bankruptcy. By the time Aarav was in high school, creditors visited their home almost daily, demanding repayment. The shame weighed heavily on the family. Aarav grew up watching his father's humiliation and vowed that he would never appear weak, never seem small in the eyes of others. That vow became his obsession. After scraping through college with an average degree, Aarav reinvented himself in Delhi. He joined a series of small companies, none lasting long, but each added to his resume, carefully embellished until it looked impressive. He learned the language of boardrooms, the polished English, the confident handshake, the casual references to projects and clients that made him sound more successful than he truly was. But beneath the polish lay financial ruin. Aarav lived on credit cards, borrowed money from friends, and often gambled online. His salary, when steady, was swallowed almost immediately by debts. For every evening he dined at upscale cafes with colleagues, there were nights when he returned to a rented room with nothing but instant noodles for dinner. Worse still, Aarav carried a past that his family worked hard to bury, a previous marriage. In 2016, he had wed a woman named Priya Mehta, the daughter of a wealthy cloth merchant in Jaipur. The marriage, arranged swiftly by families eager for social advancement, collapsed within a year. Neighbors whispered of shouting matches, of Priya returning to her parents' home with bruises, of police visits that ended in private settlements. The divorce was quiet, tucked away in sealed court documents, but it left scars that never healed. Priya's family refused to speak publicly about the ordeal, fearing stigma, but their silence allowed Aarav to reinvent himself once more. By the time he met Meera, he was a man practiced at hiding. Friends described Aarav as charming but secretive. He shared stories about business deals that never quite materialized, trips abroad that no one could confirm, and family wealth that existed only in his imagination. He kept multiple phones, explaining one was for work emergencies, but frequently silenced them during outings, slipping away to take mysterious calls. His colleagues at a Gurgaon tech outsourcing firm admitted later that they barely knew him. He avoided after-work gatherings and guarded his personal life fiercely. Beneath his charm lay volatility. Aarav's temper, quick and explosive, had ended more than one friendship. A misplaced word, a perceived insult, even a delay in returning borrowed money could provoke his fury. On dating apps, where he maintained profiles under different names, women complained of his controlling behavior and constant need to know their whereabouts. Several unmatched him after only a few days, unsettled by his intensity. His family knew more than they admitted. His mother quietly confided to a relative that Aarav was difficult, sometimes impossible. His father defended him fiercely, desperate to see his son settled, hoping marriage would stabilize him. The unspoken truth was that they saw Meera not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a savior who might finally anchor their troubled son. Yet there were warning signs. During the engagement period, Aarav's behavior sometimes cracked the veneer of charm. He questioned Meera about her male colleagues, demanded to know why she worked late, and bristled when she spoke of independence. Once, after she joked about keeping her surname after marriage, his face darkened. "A wife belongs to her husband's family," he said sharply, before softening his tone with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Meera, accustomed to compromise and forgiveness, brushed it aside. Every relationship had its flaws, she reasoned. Besides, her parents seemed so relieved that she had found a suitable match that voicing concerns felt ungrateful. What Meera could not see was the secret Aarav carried with him into the marriage: his failed past, his financial instability, his violent temper. Secrets wrapped in layers of charm, hidden carefully behind expensive cologne and rehearsed smiles. On their wedding night, when the music faded and the guests departed, Aarav was not just a new husband. He was a man sitting on a ticking time bomb of debts, shame, and lies. And within hours, that carefully constructed facade would begin to crack. The first time Meera met Aarav Malhotra, It was over tea in a modest living room in Delhi, the kind of arranged introduction that still anchors many Indian marriages. Their families had been connected through a distant cousin who assured the Sharmas that the Malhotras were respectable people from Gurgaon. Respectability was the currency of matchmaking, and Aarav had it in abundance, on paper. He arrived wearing a crisp shirt and polished shoes, offering sweets from an expensive bakery. His voice carried the practiced confidence of a man who had rehearsed this moment. When he complimented Meera on her academic achievements, her parents exchanged relieved glances. For years, they had worried that her independence and career ambitions might frighten away potential suitors. Here, finally, was someone who seemed to value them. Their early conversations were pleasant, even promising. Aarav asked about her work as an accountant, listened as she spoke about her dreams, and nodded with approval. He spoke of his own job, project management at a multinational firm, painting a picture of stability and ambition. Meera found his attention flattering. Unlike previous suitors who had dismissed her career as a temporary hobby, Aarav seemed to admire her determination. Over the next few weeks, they met several times, chaperoned coffees, short phone calls, carefully arranged family dinners. Each encounter seemed to confirm what Meera wanted to believe, that Aarav was not just a suitable match, but perhaps the partner who could finally share the weight she had carried alone. But beneath the charm, small cracks showed. Aarav avoided questions about his past, brushing them off with vague answers. "I've had my share of struggles," he would say with a shrug, "but that's behind me now." He grew restless when conversations lingered on finances, steering instead toward lighthearted topics. Once when Meera mentioned a male colleague helping her with a project, Aarav's smile faltered. "Men and women working late together can cause misunderstandings," he said, his tone clipped before quickly shifting back to warmth. Meera noticed but chose silence. Everyone had flaws, she reasoned. She reminded herself of her parents' relief, their quiet prayers finally answered. And so she pushed doubts aside, convincing herself that marriage would smooth out their differences. The engagement moved swiftly. Within 3 months of their introduction, wedding preparations consumed both families. The Sharma household, though modest in means, poured their savings into the celebration. "This is our daughter's once-in-a-lifetime moment," Anita declared, stitching extra hours to afford new saris for relatives. Aarav's family promised to handle the banquet hall and arrangements, ensuring the marriage appeared balanced and respectable. On the morning of the wedding, Delhi shimmered with winter sun. The Bharat, the groom's procession, danced through the streets to the beat of dole drums, Aarav seated on a decorated white horse, smiling like a man who had conquered destiny. Guests clapped, children ran alongside, and strangers paused to watch the spectacle of wealth and joy. Inside the banquet hall, Meera prepared for her new life. Draped in a red lehenga embroidered with gold thread, her bangles jingled with every movement. Henna still fresh on her palms bore the initials of her new husband. Her friends teased her gently, asking about honeymoon plans, while her mother wept quietly in a corner, both proud and heartbroken. The ceremony itself unfolded with traditional grandeur. Mantras chanted by the priest filled the air with solemnity. Fire burned brightly in the Havan Kund as Aarav and Meera circled it 7 times, each step binding them in vows of loyalty, love, and trust. "From this day forward," the priest declared, "your lives are one." But behind the festive music and floral garlands, subtle unease lingered. During the rituals, Aarav checked his phone twice, earning a sharp glance from his father. When guests praised Meera's career, Aarav's smile tightened. And though his vows echoed with conviction, his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else, pressure, perhaps, or fear. By nightfall, when fireworks lit the Delhi sky, the couple was officially husband and wife. Photographs captured them smiling, hands entwined, garlands draped around their necks. To their families, it was the beginning of a beautiful union. To friends scrolling through social media, it was another grand Indian wedding. But for Meera, though she didn't yet realize it, the marriage was not a promise. It was a gamble. She had entrusted her future to a man whose past remained hidden in shadows. And in less than 48 hours, on the white sands of Goa, that gamble would cost her everything. The morning after their wedding, the newlyweds boarded a flight to Goa, a destination chosen for its postcard beauty and promise of privacy. For Meera, it was her first time staying at a five-star resort. She pressed her face against the airplane window, watching the coastline shimmer below, her heart swelling with gratitude. She whispered a silent prayer, thanking the gods for a husband who, despite his intensity, seemed to offer stability and a future. Aarav beside her was quieter. He scrolled through his phone with quick, darting movements, replying to messages that he brushed off as work emails. His jaw was tense, his shoulders hunched slightly forward as if the weight of something unseen pressed down on him. Meera noticed but dismissed it. Stress, she thought. Everyone has stress. At the Coral Dunes Resort, staff welcomed them with garlands of frangipani and glasses of fresh coconut water. Their honeymoon suite overlooked the Arabian Sea, its balcony opening onto waves that glittered under the late afternoon sun. Inside, champagne chilled in a silver bucket, and rose petals were scattered across white sheets. It looked like every dream Meera had dared to imagine. That first evening, they dined by torchlight on the beach. The tide whispered against the shore as they clinked glasses of sparkling wine. Aarav laughed at her nervous attempt to eat lobster, teasing her gently. For a few hours, the world felt perfect. But perfection is fragile. By the second day, small fissures appeared. Aarav excused himself frequently, stepping away to take calls. He claimed they were from his office in Gurgaon, urgent matters he couldn't ignore. Yet when Meera caught glimpses of his phone screen, the names flashing across didn't look like colleagues. Once, she saw the name Priya appear before he hurriedly silenced the device. "Work never ends, huh?" she asked lightly, trying to mask the unease in her voice. He smiled thinly. "Just office politics, don't worry about it." But his tone carried an edge, final, discouraging further questions. That night, when Meera unpacked their bags, she noticed a small black leather folder tucked beneath his clothes. Inside, she found documents she didn't understand at first: loan statements, overdue notices, and what looked like a court summons. Before she could study them, Aarav entered the room abruptly. His face darkened when he saw the folder in her hands. "Why are you going through my things?" His voice was sharp, colder than she had ever heard. "I wasn't," she stammered. "I was just putting away clothes," it slipped out. He snatched the folder, shoving it back into the suitcase. For a moment his eyes burned with a fury that made her chest tighten, but just as quickly his expression softened. He cupped her cheek, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry, John, it's just stress, some old financial issues, nothing for you to worry about. I'll handle it." Meera nodded, but unease lingered. On the third day, Aarav suggested they stay in the suite instead of exploring Goa. He ordered room service, opened a bottle of wine, and insisted they simply enjoy each other. But as the hours passed, his mood shifted unpredictably. At times he was affectionate, pulling her close, showering her with compliments. At other times he grew withdrawn, staring out at the sea in silence, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. By evening, an argument erupted over something trivial. Meera had posted a honeymoon photo on Instagram, a candid shot of the two of them laughing at the beach. Aarav's reaction was immediate and violent. He grabbed her phone, demanding she delete it. "Why would you share our private life like this?" he snapped. "Do you want the whole world watching us?" "It was just a photo," she protested, tears welling. "Everyone shares." "I'm not everyone," he shouted before realizing how loud his voice had become. He drew a deep breath, forced his tone calm, and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to raise my voice. I want to protect us. I don't trust people." Meera tried to believe him, but the cracks were widening. The honeymoon she had imagined as a sanctuary was slowly turning into a cage. That night, long after Aarav had fallen asleep, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above. Her phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand, a message from an unknown number. Heart racing, she unlocked it. The text read only 3 words: "Ask him why." Her hands trembled. She looked at Aarav sleeping peacefully beside her, his face serene in the moonlight, and felt a chill run through her body. The paradise of Goa had begun to sour. And Meera sensed, though she could not yet name it, that her husband's hidden past was about to collide violently with her fragile future. On the fourth day of their honeymoon, Goa glistened beneath a cloudless sky. The resort buzzed with tourists heading for dolphin tour and beachside markets, but in the Coral Dunes honeymoon suite, a storm brewed behind closed doors. Meera woke early, slipping quietly from bed while Aarav slept, his phone clutched tightly in one hand as if guarding it even in dreams. She tiptoed to the balcony, hoping the sea breeze might calm her restless thoughts. The strange message, "Ask him why," still echoed in her mind, burning like a warning. Her gaze drifted back inside. Aarav stirred, rolling over, his arm falling limply to the side. The phone slipped from his grip, landing silently on the carpet. For a moment, Meera hesitated. Then, driven by fear and desperation, she picked it up. What she saw froze her blood. A string of messages from a contact named Priya. The words were unmistakable. "You can't run from this forever. Does your new wife know the truth? I won't be silenced anymore." The text chain stretched back weeks, filled with threats, accusations, fragments of a past Aarav had never shared. And then, buried among the messages, she found a scanned document, a divorce decree dated 2017, bearing Aarav's name and that of a woman named Priya Mehta. Her chest tightened, breath catching in her throat. He had been married before, he had lied. She dropped the phone as if it had burned her, backing away, her mind spinning. Every strange silence, every flash of temper, every evasive answer suddenly snapped into place. She thought of the lone statements she had glimpsed in his folder, the late-night calls, the eruptions of anger. This wasn't just stress. It was a web of secrets, debt, divorce, deceit, that he had carried into their marriage. And she was the one ensnared. When Aarav awoke, he found her sitting stiffly in a chair, his phone on the table beside her. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, but her voice trembled with quiet fury. "Who is Priya?" The question sliced through the morning air. For a moment, Aarav said nothing. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting from her face to the phone, then back again. He opened his mouth, closed it, then forced a smile that looked brittle. "Just someone from my past," he said finally. "It's not important." "Not important?" Meera's voice cracked. "She's your ex-wife, Aarav. You lied to me, to my family, to everyone." His expression darkened. "It was years ago, a mistake. It doesn't matter now." "It matters to me," she shouted, rising to her feet. "You promised me honesty. You made me believe." "Enough," he roared, slamming his hand against the wall. The sound reverberated through the suite, making her flinch. He stepped closer, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're the first to question me? Do you know what I've been through, what I've survived?" Tears stung her eyes, but she held her ground. "I don't care about your excuses. You betrayed me. I deserve the truth." Aarav's breathing quickened, chest heaving, hands trembling. He paced the room like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. Finally, he turned sharply. "You think you're so righteous. Do you know what she did to me? Priya ruined me. She spread lies. She left me with nothing. You don't understand what it means to lose everything." Meera shook her head, voice breaking. "No, Aarav, you ruined yourself, and now you've ruined me too." The words landed like a blow. His eyes narrowed, his face flushing crimson. He stepped forward, towering over her. "Don't ever speak to me like that." She stumbled back, her shoulders brushing the cold glass of the balcony door. "What are you going to do? Hit me? Like you hit her?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a split second, silence hung heavy in the air. Aarav's eyes widened, his breath caught, and then, like a match igniting, his rage exploded. "You think you know everything? You know nothing!" he screamed, his hand striking the table, sending a wine glass shattering to the floor. Shards glittered like tiny daggers across the carpet. Meera's heart pounded. She wanted to run, to scream, to throw open the balcony doors and leap into safety. But her legs felt rooted to the ground, her voice trapped in her throat. Aarav stepped closer, his hand gripping her wrist tightly. "You're my wife now, mine, and you will not destroy me the way she did." She tried to pull free, wincing at the pain. "Let me go." But his grip only tightened, his nails digging into her skin. "You belong to me," he hissed. "Do you understand? To me." For the first time, Meera saw the man behind the mask completely exposed. Not the charming suitor, not the polished professional, but the broken, desperate, violent man hiding beneath. And in that moment, she realized her honeymoon was no longer a celebration. It was a prison. Her voice steadied, though her hands trembled. "If you don't let me go, Aarav, I will tell everyone, the police, my parents, the world, your lies will come out." His face twisted with panic, then fury. "No," he spat. "You won't, because if you do—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. That night, the suite that had once echoed with laughter and whispers of love reverberated instead with shouts, the sound of objects breaking, and the muffled cries of a woman realizing the man she had married was not her partner, but her enemy. By the time silence returned, the fragile foundation of their marriage had crumbled completely. There would be no reconciliation, no healing, only tragedy waiting on the horizon. And by dawn, Meera Sharma's fate would be sealed. Night settled over the coral dunes resort, the moon casting silver streaks across the Arabian Sea. From the honeymoon suite, muffled voices rose, first low and tense, then sharp and jagged. Guests in nearby rooms later recalled the faint sound of a woman crying, followed by the crash of glass against tile. Inside, the suite was chaos. The balcony door rattled as if caught in a storm. Pillows lay scattered across the floor, rose petals trampled into the carpet. A wine bottle rolled beneath the bed, dripping its last crimson drops across the rug. Meera fought desperately. Her screams were muffled by Aarav's hand, her wrists pinned against the wall. She kicked, clawed, scratched. Her nails raked deep into his forearm, leaving angry red welts. "Please, Aarav, stop!" she gasped, but her pleas only seemed to enrage him further. "You won't destroy me," he spat, his voice hoarse with fury. "You're not going to ruin me like she did." The struggle spilled into the bathroom, the tiled floor slick with water from an overturned glass. Meera tried to break free, reaching for the doorknob, but Aarav yanked her back with brute force. Her bangles snapped under the pressure, scattering across the tiles like tiny, shattered mirrors. Neighbors later reported hearing a loud thud, a body hitting the floor, a scream cut short. For several agonizing minutes, the suite echoed with the sounds of violence, fists striking flesh, furniture scraping, glass breaking. Then silence. When it was over, Meera lay motionless on the bathroom floor, her dupatta twisted around her neck, her eyes half open in lifeless disbelief. Blood trickled from a gash on her temple where her head had struck the counter. The henna on her hands, once a symbol of love and luck, was smeared with crimson. Aarav stood above her, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. His arms bore the marks of her resistance, deep scratches, crescent-shaped bruises, but his face was eerily calm, as if the storm inside him had finally broken. He staggered back, staring at her body, the reality of what he had done sinking slowly in. Panic surged. He splashed water on her face, shook her shoulders, whispered her name, but Meera did not stir. He pressed trembling fingers to her pulse, found nothing, and let out a strangled sob. For a brief moment, guilt flickered in his eyes, but almost instantly, survival instinct took over. He dragged her body toward the bathroom doorway, adjusting her limbs to make it look as though she had slipped and fallen. He wiped the counter with a towel, gathered shards of glass, tried to erase the evidence of struggle. But the scene refused to cooperate. The bruises on her throat, the broken bangles, the defensive wounds on his own arms, they all spoke louder than his lies ever could. At 4:12 a.m., his voice cracked through the resort's reception line. "My wife, she fainted. She's not breathing. Please send help." By the time paramedics arrived, Meera Sharma was dead. The honeymoon suite, once decorated with rose petals and champagne, was now a crime scene, an altar to betrayal, violence, and a love story that had ended in murder. The Coral Dunes resort, usually alive with laughter and clinking glasses, awoke to sirens and whispers. Guests peered from balconies as police sealed off the honeymoon wing, yellow tape slicing through paradise. The fairy tale suite was now a sealed chamber of tragedy. Inside, investigators photographed everything, The broken bangles, the overturned chair, the bruises on Meera's neck. Forensics dusted for prints, measured blood spatter, and bagged evidence with the precision of surgeons. To them, it was clear this was no accident. Yet Aarav tried to maintain the lie. "She fainted," he repeated to paramedics, his voice trembling but rehearsed. "She slipped in the bathroom. I tried to help her." He clutched his bandaged arm, scratches glaring like red signatures of guilt. But the inconsistencies stacked quickly. Doctors at the local hospital confirmed cause of death: asphyxiation due to strangulation, not a fall. The gash on her head, though severe, was secondary. The bruises around her neck, the broken blood vessels in her eyes, they told a different story, one of prolonged struggle. Detectives pressed Aarav for details. His timeline shifted with every retelling. At first, she had collapsed after drinking wine. Later, he claimed she slipped while arguing. When confronted with the defensive wounds on his arms, he stammered. She was panicking. She grabbed me." Meanwhile, Meera's family in Lucknow received the call that shattered their world. Her father collapsed upon hearing the words, "Your daughter is no more." Her mother, inconsolable, wailed into the receiver, "We gave her away with blessings, and you bring her back like this." Back in Goa, whispers spread quickly. Staff remembered the shouting from the suite, the sound of glass breaking. A housekeeper admitted she had seen Aarav pacing the corridor earlier that night, phone pressed tight to his ear, muttering angrily. Within 48 hours, Aarav was taken into custody. The news exploded across Indian media. Honeymoon horror, groom arrested in bride's death. For the investigators, the puzzle pieces were falling into place. Hidden debts, an undisclosed ex-wife, and now, a bride dead less than a week after marriage. For Aarav, the carefully constructed facade had collapsed. And for Meera, the woman who dreamed of lifting her family from struggle, justice would now depend on a system too often swayed by money, influence, and silence. The trial of Aarav Malhotra began 6 months after Meera's death, in a packed courtroom in Goa where ceiling fans stirred hot air heavy with anticipation. Journalists crowded the benches, their cameras flashing each time Aarav was escorted in, clad in white kurta pajama, face carefully composed. For the prosecution, the case seemed straightforward. They presented photographs of the crime scene, shattered glass, bruises around Meera's throat, the defensive scratches on Aarav's arms. Forensic experts testified that her injuries were consistent with manual strangulation, not a fall. Neighbors spoke of hearing shouting, a thud, and silence. The prosecution painted a damning portrait: a man with a hidden past, a failed marriage, crippling debts, and a violent temper. "He promised her a honeymoon," the prosecutor said, his voice ringing through the chamber, but delivered a death sentence. But the defense fought fiercely. Aarav's lawyers argued it was an accident, an argument gone wrong, a tragic fall. They claimed the scratches were desperate attempts to help his wife. They leaned heavily on cultural tropes, the pressures of marriage, the stress of family honor. At times, they even suggested Meera had been emotionally unstable, a cruel distortion that left her family weeping silently in the gallery. The media dubbed it the honeymoon murder case. Every headline, every television debate dissected Meera's life, her choices, even her character. Strangers speculated about her marriage, forgetting she was more than a victim. She had been a daughter, a sister, a woman with dreams. Weeks stretched into months. Witnesses were called, cross-examined, dismissed. Aarav sat impassive, eyes fixed on the floor, hands folded neatly, as if waiting for the storm to pass. Finally, the verdict arrived. The judge declared Aarav guilty of culpable homicide but not murder, a technical distinction enough to reduce his sentence. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison with possibility of parole. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Meera's parents clutched each other, devastated. Her brother shouted, "This is not justice, she was killed," before being escorted out by police. For Meera's family, the verdict felt like a second death. The system had acknowledged her suffering, but failed to honor her life. Aarav, the man who had taken everything from her, would one day walk free. The gavel fell, but closure never came. The Coral Dunes resort eventually reopened its honeymoon suite, scrubbing away the stains of tragedy, repainting walls, and replacing shattered glass. New couples checked in, their laughter echoing through the same hallways, unaware of the shadows that lingered there. But for Meera Sharma's family, the suite would forever remain a tomb, a place where their daughter's dreams were buried. Back in Lucknow, her bedroom stood untouched. Textbooks still lined the shelf, a half-finished notebook rested on her desk, and her favorite dupatta hung neatly on the chair where she had left it. Her mother often sat there in silence, running her fingers over the fabric, whispering prayers that dissolved into tears. Her father rarely spoke at all. The girl who had fought her way from kerosene-lit study nights to a promising career was gone, and no verdict, no prison sentence could restore her. Neighbors still whispered, not about Meera's ambition or her kindness, but about her bad luck, as if fate, not violence, had ended her life. This silence, this cultural tendency to shield perpetrators while questioning victims, was perhaps the deepest wound of all. Meera's story became a cautionary tale, a headline consumed and then forgotten by many. But to those who knew her, she was not just a victim. She was a young woman who dreamed of lifting her family out of struggle, who believed in love despite her doubts, who entered marriage with hope, not fear. Her wedding night had been meant as the start of forever. Instead, it became the end. The tragedy of Meera's death was not only the violence she endured, but the betrayal of trust, the betrayal of a system that allowed Aarav's past to be hidden, that minimized his crime, that left her family searching for justice in a world that offered none. And so the lesson remains. Behind every perfect facade, there may be shadows waiting to surface. Every silence, every unanswered question, every uneasy glance can hide a truth capable of shattering lives. For Meera Sharma, the cost of discovering that truth was her life. And for those who loved her, the haunting will never fade.